Welcome to this special Movers and Shakers conversation with Mark Conacher from SENSTEC USA. Mark, I've been really impressed with your activity the last few days here, and you seem to be everywhere, and that's a good thing because of course you've got a great message. So the biggest question I've got for you today really is, we're at the InstallerSHOW at the NEC, majority of people coming are installers. Why is it important to support installers, and in particular to look at succession planning for the future?
You know what, obviously having been in construction all my life and physically installing kitchens and bathrooms, having my own business for 30 years, installation is just huge. It's, I always view it as the forgotten part of the industry. We have all the manufacturers and the retailers, but the installers are hugally important, and this place, I was delighted when I saw that kitchens and bathrooms were entering into the InstallerSHOW. I felt it was just amazing, and I was excited, and there was no way I was missing this. We have, it's not that installation or installers are more important than manufacturers or retailers, but they are just as important. And to celebrate this in a show like this is just amazing. With each part of that, the industry is nothing without the other parts. And I think just bringing the installation, making people aware of just how important it is going to bring this puzzle together. And obviously we have this the aging workforce, and so even within that little part of the puzzle, we have issues. Well, we need to fix those issues, and so therefore encouraging, bringing apprentice, making awareness of apprenticeships is vastly important, and this was great with you guys being here and others that are promoting getting young people into the industry.
That's great, Mark, and the meaningful conversation that we've both been having, I think let's go straight to the devil's advocate. So I'm an installer, and I'm saying, I understand what you're telling me, guys, but if I train somebody up, it's likely they're going to be my competitor in the near future. How do we get over that objection?
It's a very valid. All installers. The problem is in the industry that in installation of kitchens and bathrooms, the majority are micro businesses. They are one-man bands, and so yes, when they bring on an apprentice, there's that fear that, well, the minute that their time's out, they're just going to leave and become that competitor. I think retailers have a role to support those little micro businesses. They could do that in different ways, just by being loyal, but by helping them and supporting them, not just by the minute that the apprentice's time's out, they say, yes, welcome, come and work for us, but by saying, no, we're going to look after the guys that work for us. And yes, as much as they use subcontracted, most retailers use subcontracted installers, but treat them like an employee, bring them in, and maybe eventually give some of these guys, yes, it's an aging workforce, maybe if they don't want to have a multi-business or a bigger business, well, maybe there's a route for them to come into the retail side and help build awareness of apprenticeships, and maybe the retailers could employ their own installers, and that's another way of giving security to an aging workforce.
So I think within that answer, Mark, you mentioned that they're potentially the let's say the average age of an installer is 55 plus in most cases. So is there an angle here where actually if you do hire someone as an apprentice, that apprentice could actually succeed and take over that business?
Yeah, there's been this message create a legacy or what. There's nothing really. You can't create. They could continue the business, but the person who's coming out of the business would just be coming out of the business, because it all comes down, at the end of the day, it all comes down to finances. And why would a young person taking over a business take less just so as the owner can continue taking a cut when they can do it on their own? Again, micro businesses. But no, they could still take over that business. The person that's going to retire is going to retire anyway. and that the workforce is already there, the contracts are there. If that young person has been working with that company for a while, then the retailers already know who they are. So yeah, it's there to continue the work, and we need to just find routes of selling that message to young people, but understanding that aging workforce, guys like me that were installers, that they're being protected. That's really all it comes down to. Installers have enough on their plate. They look at, everybody's pushing apprenticeships, but the installers do have a lot on their plate, trying to juggle everything. And actually, so to try and take on an apprentice, that one-man band, so now the cost of taking on an apprentice has been taken out of the equation. Government grants, that's really not an issue. But obviously you have the cost of the employee, but you'd be paying for anybody, no matter who you had. But we do need to just support that employer, if you want, and I think the way to support them is the retailers, just making the employer feel more comfortable and to say, look, we've got your back. If you take on an apprentice, we'll look after you, we'll make sure that you've got the workload that you need. Because remember, training that apprentice, his focus is changing. It's changing to helping that young guy, or whoever the apprentice is. I guess it doesn't matter about age, but helping that new employee become a great installer. That takes time, and time is money. And so that's what the guy that's the installer, that micro business, they've only got X amount of work ahead of them, and they've got mortgage payments attached to that, just like everybody else. So if they're reducing their workload because of having an apprentice, that also becomes a worry. So it's trying to navigate that. As I say, maybe better pricing out there from the retailers for the installer would help navigate, because prices aren't always that great. The retailers sometimes, the bigger retailers sometimes lean on volume, that we're giving you X amount, and that's how they get away with lower installation costs. But maybe giving them a bigger share of the pie would help the installer.
Mark, you mentioned there a couple of times the word apprentice, and let's just say if you took 100 installers, out of 100 installers, and let's say 7 or 8 of them said, we have an apprentice, how many of those 7 or 8 do you think are on a government standard, or how many of them are just people that are there training?
And you're meaning coming from the employer?
Yeah, so if the employer is the installer, and the installer is taking on an apprentice, in conversation the last few days, it's very apparent that it's been said, I have an apprentice working for me, which is fine, but I'm just drilling down to an apprentice, because there's apprentice on a government standard, a qualification, and there's apprentice in terms of someone there looking to train in-house.
So what happens, the truth of what happens is, especially in installation, they end up, a lot of people will say, oh, we have an apprentice. Is he really an apprentice? No, he's a young lad that's came on as casual labour, and they're going to train him up. You know what? I've done that. I've brought young guys in, trained them up, and been in that situation where they've left. Good on them. I have no problem with training someone up and them leaving. It's the issue always becomes that you train them up. They want to leave because someone's whispered in their ear how much more money they could make. But the real route for them is just to go where the source of the work is that they know, and that's your source. These people that left me are just as, they run their own businesses. They run their own businesses now, I know they do, and I know they're successful, and I know they're doing well.
So is the argument then for having an apprentice on a government qualification standard stronger, where we can say, actually, if you're on a proper apprenticeship program of 18 months, you're tying somebody in for a duration, or let's call it a loose contract, and actually at the end of that 18 months you've got a qualification, and if you've looked after the apprentice well, you paid them well, there's more chance they're going to stay working with you potentially?
one of the problems I'll tell you from an apprentice point of view, I would say it from my point of view, the first time I heard about this, the apprenticeship, if you want, is that the installers that are out there now, or most of them, are trained in joinery. If you want, they're joiners. Most of the joiners end up kitchen fitters. But all these joiners did a 4-year apprenticeship. So when you suddenly start throwing in, we're going to give someone an apprenticeship for 18 months or 2 years, I'm interested to know what that person, once they've done that 18 months, what they class themselves as. Because the fitter is slightly insulted that, so our 4 years wasn't good. We could now do what we learned in 4 years, you could now do in 18 months. No, you can't. Do you know what I mean? There's a huge, it takes years to become a great fitter. But it's just, so that was my instant reaction when I saw that this 2-year, 18 months apprenticeship came out. And it became a bit more like, you know what, back to what we spoke about the other day with the YTS, it was a youth training scheme, it was work experience. In that 2 years, to train someone up to be able to install a kitchen within 18 months to 2 years would need to be intense. It would be an intense course. So how does that employer, the micro business, the one-man band, how does he make a living when he's concentrating? I used to fit 2 kitchens a week. I couldn't fit 2 kitchens a week and concentrate on intensely training someone in 2 years.
I think it's a combination of both, but I'm really interested in this because if you look at the statistics at the moment in terms of the number of installer apprenticeships the last 12 months, because the numbers are public information actually, and it appears the majority of those numbers, which are way less than 100, are with the multiples. So what advice, Mark, have you got of how could the one-man band, as you say, or the small SMEs, how can we encourage these guys to say, look, actually, we want to take people on as well, we want to train people and upskill the industry, because at the moment it's very skewed to multiples only.
Yeah, we do. The number one thing is, whilst it says I've done it myself, I've taken young people on and just as a casual labour, trained them up over a period of years and they became a great fitter. I would always say we need a standard. They absolutely need a standard. So that is the route to go. And at that time, however many years ago that I was doing that, yes, maybe it was a lot more complicated to take on an apprentice, and that was the reason I didn't. And we definitely have to be pushing in that direction. Yes, I've always said that it's a lot easier for a multi-team to take on an apprentice because, if anybody leaves, it's a lot easier to cope with. The training, so the training reducing the workload of one of your fitters, that can be dealt with. It's just kind of lost within the whole work pattern. That's easier to deal with. How we get a one-man band to take on, it all comes down to money. And as I say, I think if maybe that the retailers could, because remember, the retailers are charging the customers. Do you know what I mean? So they're charging an installation cost and then subcontracting in the fitter. But maybe if there was an added portion of that, if you've got an apprentice going through the standard, that this is the bonus you're going to get with your installation cost. So be it £100, an extra £100. If you've got an apprentice, we'll give you an extra £100 for every installation, plucking figures. But you know what? That would maybe start an incentive to think, okay, right, it's actually even the wage isn't necessarily costing me as much, but I'm training someone up. It's just to compensate those losses in time. That guy has got X amount of work ahead of him. As I say, he has mortgages, he has bills like everybody else. He is not. Would you reduce your wage to take on an apprentice? Nobody would. It shouldn't come out of your pocket. It has to be absorbed.
So I guess that's a really good answer. So I guess the message for government could be, if we know we've got a skills gap issue, which is getting worse and worse, and let's say, take your very good point, it is about money and who's going to pay for the training, the direct training. If there was some kind of added incentive in terms of a end of apprenticeship bonus or an extra payment per job completed, that's got to be a game changer.
But remember, that's going back to the government and everything, but it's never always the government's fault. Do you know what I mean? As I say, I go back to the retailer, and retailers won't like this message, but the retailers are charging customers X amount for that installation. Pluck figures out the air. They're charging £5,000 for that installation, and they're paying that installer £2,000 for installation. Now, they're quite entitled to earn that profit, but maybe we need to get a little bit of that profit, and they can plough that, and they can help the industry, and they could help apprenticeships by supporting the installers who work for them every day. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe, I think what you're saying there, Mark, in a better marketplace, that potentially you could add like plus 10% on the cost of installation and leave that as a pot for a potential encouragement for training.
For training, absolutely. But we have to get rid of the losses for the installer. This can't be heaped onto the installer that all these one-man bands, it's your problem and you need to fix this industry because you've been in this industry all your life and you're just going to walk away. That's not his problem at all. It's collectively. So it's the manufacturers, it's the retailers, and yes, because at the end of the day it's the installer that has to do the training.
Absolutely, it's all about training, because if you invest in your people, you're going to get better results, you're going to professionalise the industry. Mark, I'd love to ask you this question. This is my last question really before we finish our chat. 30 years ago, in most cases, if you're an independent retailer, you had the installer on the books. 30 years later, it seems to be the opposite, where they're more subcontract. So there's less control on asking the installer to perhaps conduct the training. So why do you think 30 years later, most installers are invoicing for their time rather than being on the books?
You know what? The thing in my experience 30 years ago, I've always been self-employed, so that's been my angle coming into the industry. I think there's this thing about installers. Again, one-man bands, they're running their own business. That's what everybody wants, to run their own business. And to be honest, a one-man band isn't really running his own business. He's bought himself a job and he's paying his tax himself. That's really back to the old 714 tax bracket. That's kind of what they're doing. I think it's just. I think maybe to solve the problem, we do need to encourage people back into the. Bigger retailers are employing fitters. It's security. Do you know what I mean? And your average installer, nobody's making huge amounts of money. They don't have there's not a big pension pot there for them. Most of them aren't. Do you know what I mean? They're weekend millionaires, and there's not a lot of planning for the future because there's not huge amounts of money for install. There seems to be this perception that there is, but for a one-man band, yeah, he's making a decent wage, but it's nothing to write home about. And so maybe for all those kind of micro businesses, we could take that pressure off. The retailers can maybe look to, well, maybe we could employ you, and then we can use your skills to help train the workforce of the future, and they can take, because retailers have broader shoulders, to absorb costs and pressure and all these kinds of things than this one little micro business. As I say, the bigger the business gets, the easier it becomes to take on and train staff. But I don't have the actual statistics, I'm sure somebody out there will, but what the statistics are, most of them are micro businesses. How can we expect a micro business across the UK to save the installation industry? That isn't going to happen.
So, last question, Mark. Insulation can be aggro. So which is easier, fit in a kitchen or fit in a bathroom?
Oh, well, from a joiner, it's fit in a kitchen. But actually being a joiner, fitting kitchens was great. But then fit in a bathroom, installing bathrooms is the start, for a joiner, is the start of learning how to run your own business for me. Because what you're doing is you're now using all these subcontractors. You're using a tiler, you're using a plumber, you're using an electric. There's all these trades, and you're doing less of the work. Yes, there's a little bit of work in there for you, but not very much. But now you're project managing all these different trades. And the better you get at that, the more chance that you can take on different projects and have multiple projects going, and slowly you're able to step away. A lot of joiners, I was speaking to an installer just here yesterday, and we spoke about kind of like this subject, and he said bathrooms. Oh no, I don't want anything about bathrooms, but it's like, why not? Why not? Because suddenly you can use your time differently, and now your business can grow because you have a project on the go that you're not involved in. You've project managed it, but once it's going, it's going. Now you could do something else. So, in a growing sense, bathrooms are better. From a joinery, for what your love of what you do, I loved being an installer. I loved being on the tools, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The sexy stuff. It was a kitchen. You're the main guy on a kitchen.
So it very much depends on the individual. Mark Conacher, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Having me. Thank you.